Welcome to the Cause Effect 4.0 podcast, where we explore how technology and innovation are shaping a more inclusive world. I'm your host, Celina Lee. Swahili language models are no longer a niche market. It's becoming a defining test of whether artificial intelligence can truly serve Africa. Today, we're looking at the intersect of language, identity, and opportunity in AI. While global models continue to expand, many African languages remain underrepresented, despite being spoken by hundreds of millions of people. That gap is now driving a new wave of innovation, led by local builders who understand the cultural and linguistic nuances that machines often can miss. As efforts grow to build AI that works for everyone, certain questions now emerge. What does it mean to be an under-resourced language? How good can language models get with limited training data? And how good is good enough, and how large is large enough to have real impact? Joining me today is Michael Mollel, a Tanzanian AI researcher, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Certify. Michael began his journey as a competitor on Zindi, Africa's largest AI and data science platform, where he developed his skills and built collaborations that would later evolve into building an African language model. Today, he is the CTO of PAWA, a product focused on advancing Swahili and other African languages in AI, while also creating opportunities for young data scientists to contribute through real-world challenges. Welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thank you, Celina. Thank you.
So I'm so excited to have you here because we've actually known about you for a few years now, and we're very excited about your story and what you're working on. So you started, you can tell us how many years ago you started on Zindi, and maybe you can tell us like what skills or breakthroughs did you actually have while you were working on the platform?
Thank you very much, Celina. My story, actually, I was a master's student when I heard about AI. It was 2012, and then I became curious about AI, even though there were few platforms, I can say, or few materials to practice. After my master's, I go for jobs. Yeah, jobs is kind of sometimes boring. And then I got my PhD. I got the PhD studies, and this is when I started now to practice real AI. So I was looking for the platform where I can test my capabilities myself. I can test what I'm capable of, right? And then I found Zindi. So I was so excited the day I found Zindi, and actually I registered instantly, and then I don't remember the first competition I did with Zindi, but I think it was fire detection in Congo, if I remember correctly. Yes. So that was my first competition. So I joined Zindi. I was thinking myself, because I had experience with AI and machine learning. So I think myself I'm good. But when I joined Zindi, I realized I'm the bottom of the leaderboard. And I was like, wow, this is something like, this is not something I'm expecting, right? So slowly I started to develop skills, because I iterate my problem very fast. Resource constrained, by the way, I was using Colab GPU by then, and Colab, it took you out after some few hours. So I had to improvise, to find where I can come up with a good solution. I think that competition I end up with 27, number 27 out of 300. So I was clapping myself. I was like, yes, there's some people who are very good in Africa, and I just need to be one of them. So since that day, I was practice a lot. During COVID, I remember I practiced a lot, and during COVID, I think in Zinda I reached number less than 100, top 100. I was reached that level because I was practiced a lot, and I won some of them. So to be fair, Zindi, I know machine learning. I was knowing machine learning, but Zindi increased how I can practice and become a builder, because This is when I learn like there's a little problem we need to solve, African problems, but also I come to realize data is big issue, and then we need to localize solution. And Zindi provide all of them. And then it pushed me now to think about how can we build African solution or platform where you can solve African problem. So that's basically story of my Zindi. So I'm Zindian. I'm proud to be Zindian. Thank you.
And we'll talk about it later, but you went from being a competitor on Zindi to now hosting competitions on Zindi even,
Yes.
in the product that you're building. But so you one other aspect of this is that you later met your co-founder while you were on Zindi, and together I guess you started Sartify. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about Sartify and PAWA. And we were just talking about, what is the relationship, yeah, between the two?
Yes. So thank you very much, Celine. So one of the most meaningful thing, right, that come out of Zindi is to connect with the people, because whenever you start, you go to the leaderboard and you go to there's a section where you can share what the problem is, how other people solve. And then I found there were three Tanzanian by then where they were competing a lot. So one of them was Innocent, another was David. So the name was David. Yeah, there's another David, not David Davis. There's another David. It's called David Day. Yes, he was also from Tanzania. So we come up most of the time. We form a team from time to time, and this is when I met Innocent. So Innocent is one of the Indian, and we share same spirit, and Innocent had entrepreneurship in mind. So I also had entrepreneurship in mind from Zindi and my other experience. So we said, okay, what don't we solve African problem now, right? Real African problem. So before that, also, when I was doing Zindi, I was I come across with this GPT-2 and GPT-1 when I was doing my PhD, and that triggers me, like how these people achieve this GPT-2. I remember it was hosted on Hugging Face, if not collected. It was this lady, this GPT, whereby you just put a sentence and then it can produce the next token only. So we started, it was, I remember 2019, I started collecting Swahili coppers. So I just need, to collect Swahili coppers, even though I don't know how I can get the machine to turn this code, this model, but let's me creating one thing. So we started collecting the coppers of Swahili, and then 2022 we started a company with the Innocent. The company was certified. It was a software company. Innocent he was finishing his undergraduate by then. So we said, okay, this is a certified company whereby we wanted to do software application where we need to integrate AI in part of it. In 2023, we applied for Mozilla for Builders, and then we got a fund for Mozilla for Builders. And that fund for Mozilla for Builders changed our story. Now we have a PAWA, because we had the coppers, right? We started doing this aberration, we call aberration, whereby we try to do kind of continuous pre-training, but low scale. But through the Mozilla Builders, we got a GPU. So Mozilla gave us money, we buy GPU, and also they provide us GPU to train actual PAWA. So PAWA stands for Pan-African Wide Alignment Language Model. So PAWA is an abbreviation of Pan-African Wide Alignment Language Model. So idea of PAWA is, by then, GPT 3.5 were released, and people were so much interested with it. It was good product, to be honest, but it doesn't speak Swahili at all by then. Also, it was so expensive, so no one can able to afford it, especially $1. It was a million token, but $1 is almost a whole meal for the day in Tanzania. So actually, it's very expensive. So we think, okay, why don't we come up with an AI more agent model whereby we can fine tune to our local language, speak Swahili and the related language in East Africa or Africa as a whole, so we can save people. So we trained this PAWA and we made it by then open source. whereby our first PAWAs were open source. It was 2 billion parameter model. And then PAWA now become itself a product from Certify. And then we met Winnie through some hackathon there. And then we found, me, Innocent, and Winnie, the product called PAWA. So Winnie is the CEO of PAWA. And as I mentioned before, PAWA stands for Pan-African Word Alignment Language Model. So we had, in terms of PAWA, so PAWA is not only about text model, it also provide, we also save vision models, OCR, and we now support reasoning, and soon we also support agentic application, and voice speech, from text to speech and speech to text. We cover a lot of African language nowadays, and anyone can test PAWA through PAWA Builders.
Okay. And it's all in Swahili. When you're saying
For speech, for speech, it supports Yoruba, some Kenyan language, Zulu, and Swahili as well. But for speech, I mean speech to text. But for text model, we mostly support Swahili and English model, English languages. But we wanted now to expand. We are still looking for GPUs, especially to expand, because we have almost 67 billion African tokens. So we are sure if we get a GPU, we'll come up with very good model.
So you have 67 billion African tokens. In Swahili, how big is your data for Swahili?
So in Swahili, is the most percent of it is almost 18 to 20 billion tokens of 65 billion tokens. So the rest is African language. Our token now consists of almost 20 African languages.
Oh wow, 20 languages. You said that you've been collecting the data since you first saw ChatGPT came out. So for a number of years, can you tell me more about the data set and how are you actually collecting the data?
Yeah, so we started collecting 2018. So it was almost from Transformer paper, when it was this Transformer paper actually. We use, by then, Swahili token in most of the site in Tanzania were open. So to be fair, we scrap Swahili newspapers and other material. And then we use one of the technique whereby we fine-tune Whisper, whereby we converting a lot of YouTube Swahili videos, and so we convert them from audio to text. So this is how we achieve a lot of Swahili tokens.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so it makes sense why you needed the GPUs from Mozilla. I mean, just even processing all of that video data alone.
Yes, and I forget to mention one of the player. It was University of Dodoma. So University of Dodoma, for what I know, right, to best of my knowledge, is one of the university in Tanzania, I might say, or some part of East Africa, to own a very big GPU. So we use mostly as well University of Dodoma GPU.
Yeah. Okay, so wow. Incredible. So can you give an example of, a use case or, something that you've experienced or maybe your partners have experienced where, say, a ChatGPT or a Llama was not able to do, but now with PAWA, with the model that you've built, they are able to do?
Yes. So to be fair, these proprietary models like ChatGPT and Cloud nowadays, they're at least good in Swahili context, right, to be fair. But still, these open models, they fail a lot, like completely. You can't take Quen from scratch and then you can walk to your use case in Tanzania, for example, right? So the big difference comes when the task is deeply multilingual and institution specified. So we have a few clients in Tanzania, for example. In Tanzania, we speak in Swahili. Even in government, they speak in Swahili. So you can take that open models and then you can deploy. And at the same time, you can take proprietary model like OpenAI or cloud, because the issue of data proprietary, where sovereignty, the government doesn't want to use those kind of applications.
Yeah.
So you will end up with open model, but still, open model fails a lot. And I can tell you what, Celine, now, if you ask now ChatGPT, no matter how good is it, even GPT 5.4, to make a joke in Swahili, you will laugh. That will give you Western joke. That is, you see,
a Western joke in
give
Swahili,
you
like
West joke
translate.
in Swahili, So even now, none of the model, like Western model, like actually English token based model, can solve
Yes.
real African problem. Because in Africa, there's a way we speak. There's a way whereby we say this is a taboo. But does that model understand that? No, doesn't understand
Right.
that. Like, yes, we try one of the client recently, we try to fine tune, just fine tune, not pre-train, like contextual actually. We fine tune model to speak Swahili, but if you ask some cuss word, it will answer just right, just okay, even though that model was aligned on first place. So the idea is still there's a problem of data. So there is a data representative on these big models. Still there's a few tokens, or whenever they do alignments, they forget about most of African language. So I can imagine this is Swahili, which is spoken by 200 million people. So what can you say about Kikuyu, which might be spoken by 60 million people? Right?
Yeah.
So this might be a little problem. So for any specific task, you can't rely on any open source model. You can't rely at all.
Yeah.
Yes. And even though, so for example, in PAWA now, we are planning to release new application whereby we try to optimize different adapters. And then if you are from fintech, you will rely on specific adapter whereby it will be very good and accurate in specific. Because that's the thing we come to realize. You can't train with a low resource a generalized model. And that's is our motto.
Right. Right. Okay. I want to get back to that for sure. But on Swahili, I wanted to ask you a bit about some of the challenges or realities about Swahili. So we know that Swahili has over 12 dialects that are largely spoken. The most common ones being, okay, this is from Faustine, but the most common ones being Kimvita, Kiuguja. Okay, now you're testing my pronunciation still.
It's okay. It's
Kiambu
just fine.
and Kiambu. So there's certain dialects, and that are distinct. So how are these complexities actually taken into account with models? Let's say models in general, and how are you addressing it?
Yeah, so uh, generally we can solve all the problem, but we are trying to minimize the effect of not solving all the problem. So currently we were relying on very good quality token of text, right? And those texts come from the magazine, newspapers, right? But we know all this Kimatumbi, Kitumbatu, Kimvita, Kiunguja are found on books. Most of them are found in books. And in books, we need to do OCR application. That's why now we are researching more. We are working with University of Brown, one of the students from University of Brown, whereby we are developing a Swahili OCR model in order to make open source. So anyone can now convert the book's text, right, to the book to text. The idea is to collect more tokens because one thing, we don't have digital footprints of most of Swahili tokens. The only tokens we rely now is the formal tokens. We don't have much of the Sheng token, for example, or informal speech token. We have tried a lot to use some of them which you can find on YouTube, but we need to verify like the context, because we don't want to put bad words, because
Yeah, I
it
was
can.
thinking that the type of language or the type of content that you're dealing with in a book is different from a newspaper and is especially different from where you're translating videos into, YouTube videos into text as well,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
That you mentioned Sheng, which is a kind of a modern hybrid of English and Swahili, right? That's very much spoken in Kenya,
In
especially in
Kenya, yeah.
Nairobi. How do you, and this is just technically speaking, can you tell us a little bit about how do large language models treat even different dialects or different hybrids of the same language? What happens to the LLMs? Does it confuse it? Is it yeah, what actually happens on the technical side?
So for Shen, for example, we had some kind of few customers where they approached us when we are trying when we release power on first time, and the one problem we realize from our power, it doesn't understand at all Shen. So whenever they put Shen queries, it hallucinates a lot. And this is a challenge, because the model itself does not understand anything. It doesn't have any of those Sheng tokens. It's like when you are born, right? You're a baby, and someone asks you, can you solve integral of x from 0 to 1? It's almost impossible, right? Because you need at least some knowledge in order to answer. So the model hallucinates a lot. We wanted to solve that, but to be fair, Celine, we have a lot of problems in Africa we need to solve. Yes, I know Sheng is among them, right? But we still have application, for example, in agriculture, right, whereby we need to solve dialect problem. You remember last year we launched your voice competition, but even that application, we come up with a very good way to elaborate compared to other models, but still it fails to some of the use case, especially one of the clients in Arusha deployed. So we had to also to do fine tuning. So still, uh, we need to encourage people to do more research, because from research we come up with the new solutions, we come up with the new data, and from power point of view, we don't assume one Swahili fits all. We need to solve all those dialects, but still we don't have power to solve all of them. Especially we don't have GPU. For example, now we have a lot of tokens, but you can't move it because we need infrastructure. So African problem itself is not scientific problem, right? I'm PhD, I can solve scientific problem, but sometimes it's economical and financial. It's not about, we need this support, right? And this might is not about one company to solve all, but I believe every company solve a small problem. If we converge, yes, we can solve all the African problems.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there's like you said, there's there's many problems to be solved. So we need all hands on deck. Um, so you've touched on it a little bit, and I was really excited to hear from your point of view as someone who's actually trained an African large language model. Can you, for the listeners and for me, talk a little bit about the nuanced differences and trade-offs when we're using these different terms, right? There's foundation models, which would be like a chat GPT that was trained on literally the internet of data, right? Unstructured, every bit of piece of data was used to train that model. It is a language model, so it's well, anyway, so but then there's other things that you had just said, like, there's fine tuning, there's retraining, maybe, using existing weights like from an open source model and retraining on smaller. You also mentioned where there's a difference between a general model that can maybe do all different tasks from from writing an academic paper to, to correcting your correcting your
Normally,
social media posts or something, like, it's a very,
yeah.
or solving a math problem, like very different things. That's a general model. But then you had said something also about that for under resourced languages, we're not going to get to a general model, but there's very specific, I guess, a version of small models is another topic. So can you try to unpack some of those concepts for us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is very important question because a lot of people treat this approach interchangeably. But to be fair, they are not. They are not. They are not. So let's start from the training foundation model from scratch. So training is when you have a corpus yourself, you have architecture, which is now dummy architecture doesn't understand the context, and then you try now to embed to compress the knowledge you have from your data to that engine, right? So that is just general pre-training. We call pre-training model. It's just a nutshell pre-training model. But to be fair, this is very expensive, right? So in Africa, I can say most of the time it's not impractical, right? Especially for under low resource language, because the lesson paper, if you read, is not about how much data you have it, is how much quality data you have it, whereby most of us, we don't have much quality data we have it. We mostly rely, for example, we have new clients on distillation, whereby we distill the token from the big models, cross-source models. But also it spends a lot of compute. So if you don't have very good quality data, you end up with a bad model, even though you consume a lot of money, right? So you have to be very careful. And also you need a lot of engineers to make sure the things work. But the good thing about it is you have in control, right? For example, excuse me, if you use tokenizer model like Llama, for example, right? And you train for Swahili, even fine tune for Swahili, you come up with a high expensive token, right? Cost compared to model like Gemma, right? The underlying architecture of Llama has few tokens, whereby it doesn't understand much of the Swahili token. So in order for one word of Swahili, you need to cut that word maybe 5 times, right? But game at least understands some of Swahili, and also token context is very big, but it also is very expensive. Why you need 200,000 token to solve just a small problem where it asks you, can I go to school or not go to school? Or maybe translate this to this. It's still expensive. So if you want to train it from scratch, yes, you can, but you have to be very, very good technically to understand what the cost benefit to train the model. So then come to fine tune, which I think is more like most people doing in Africa, right? Even though PAWA we started from continued pre-training. So continued pre-training is not actual fine-tuning, but we add more tokens, right? Like pre-training in the base model. So also PAWA didn't start from zero, but we
And I
continue
think
pre-training.
that this is something that is very different. I mean, can you say, are there any other projects, organizations that have done something like that for an African language?
Uh, I don't know to say for other people's, but I see a
Mhm.
lot of people doing fine tuning. Uh, I know one paper I read is from Lelapa, if I'm mistaken. The Lelapa, they use Llama texture, and they do pre-training actually. That's the only paper I know I can refer to. So for us, we say, okay, no, we don't want to start from we train from scratch. We don't have deep computing, but we got a computer from Mozilla, right? We thanks Mozilla again. So what is the techniques we can add more knowledge? So we're starting continue pre-training, whereby we use a checkpoint from model like Llama or Gemma, and then we add more Swahili token and other African tokens, right? So we end up with a model also understand the knowledge of Swahili. And then we go for the second stage, which now I'm explaining, is called fine tuning. So fine tuning is like if I ask you, Celine, I'm assuming now, for example, if you're in the US, to go to Lome, right? So to go to Lome, maybe there's a flight to go to Canada and then to Lome, or there's a flight to go to maybe Abuja to Lome. There's a different flight. So fine tune now, you sharpen the number of loot you can take in order to maximize which loot is faster. That is analog of fine tuning. So you sharpen your decision. So whenever you ask a prompt, the capital of Rome, capital of Italy, it might, one of the output might say the capital of Italy is Rome. The other might say I've been to Italy many times and I went to their capital, which is Rome, right? So all of them are answers, but which one is the best answer? So this is called fine tuning. So fine tune as well has some limitation, right? So for example, fine tune is very difficult to add the language which is not trained on first place, which is not part of the pre-training baseline model, right? So if, for example, if I want now to train Kikuyu, to fine tune Kikuyu, I need a lot of sample to fine tune Kikuyu, which on first place, I don't have those samples as well. I don't have those data to, that's why it doesn't have Kikuyu on the first place, right? So now there's a new technique called chain of thought, whereby, for example, PAWA now we use for different companies. If we can use this open model and then we add more knowledge through chain of thought. It's very expensive, but is manageable, at least for the big companies that can afford it. So it has a lot of limits, as I said. Still, you can continue to use the same tokenizer, which the cost of token per in given language will be very expensive per words, because you don't change the tokenizer structure compared if you train from the scratch. But the advantage is it's cheaper, and I'll advise a lot of people to start from fine tuning, right? And the last one, the other people who use translation data, right? They translating fine tune data and then they train the model. Is good approach, but it has a lot of frauds. It has a lot of hallucinations. And if you mix the data, for example, if I said in Tanzania, for example, Sheng, they speak English and Swahili at the same time, it completely hallucinate. The output will be completely hallucinated. So on face of our, when we were training PAWA, the first release, we tried to use some of them for translated it to, but we realized the benchmark performed very poor because it confused the model most of the time. So I recommend the approach to follow. Just start with the translation, right? Just start, and because sometimes we don't use a big hammer, right, to kill insect, right? So maybe you just your solution is just need the it's very small, like this decision solution, like yes or no, right? So you don't need to use big model and consume a lot of compute. So starting with the translation, see, evaluate. If it doesn't work, go to fine tune. And the last resort is to use this foundation training from scratch or continue pre-training. Continue pre-training and training from scratch are a very expensive one, but fine tuning is very affordable. You can use a lot of platform which are very good, like Llama Factory or Anthros, which support a lot. Yeah, and first just try as it is model. You do small translation, see how to behave. If not, go to fine tuning. The last resort is train from scratch or continue to train.
Right, right. I like what you said that you don't need a hammer, a big hammer to kill an insect.
Yes,
Um,
don't need that.
the Yeah, I mean the limitation I suppose with the translation model is that right, it has a lot of hallucinations or it will miss a lot of just, I guess, understanding of like you had said about the
Yeah,
joke, for example, that was a
yeah,
translation
yeah.
model, I assume,
No
put on
sense.
top of a joke that doesn't necessarily translate well. What about what
Excuse
about
me.
use cases where you need high accuracy, but it's in a very specific, well-defined space? I mean, you had mentioned maybe like agriculture, for example. If you need a very narrow use case, maybe it's like advice for farmers on a very specific set of things.
Yeah.
So you want high accuracy. What is the approach there?
So I'll recommend one approach. For example, we have, as I said, we have few clients whereby they need a very, very specific use case. And most of the clients, we started with fine tuning, right? To be fair, data is still a scarcity, but how we treat them, we ask them if they have the question and answer, right? Libraries like bank. If they have it, it's very good because we use them as a seed, right? To use cross the source model, right? To make more data. Most of the
Yeah.
times this
Yes.
and the way we approach them, we don't just do fine tuning. We fine tuning with a chain of thought or reasoning. Because the idea now, the reasoning now will contain, right, even the language, sometimes the nuance of that language. And because this now is very technical, we call the loss function of the output, because idea of fine tuning, we trying to minimize the loss function of the output. So the loss function of the output will now consist of the specific languages, the specific terms, uh, indirectly. It's like we are doing continued pre-training, but indirect. So we started with this chain of thought techniques. We fine-tuning with the chain of thought data. So this is a very, very good solution, and I would recommend people to use it. Chain of thought fine-tuning. It's very
Very
good.
cool. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about the Zindi competition the competition that you hosted on Zindi for PAWA and what the goal was and what came out of that?
Yeah. Thank you very much again, Celine. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing us to host the competition on Zindi. So, in general, Swahili has spoken by more than 200 million people, right? Still, we're still suffering with a tool to communicate in terms of speaking. We don't have, it doesn't perform well. Even this Siri or Amazon, those devices, they don't speak, they don't perform well in Swahili, right? So this is another challenge. At the same time, for disabled peoples, right, who they can't type, deaf people, they need a tool to communicate with their phone. So we were thinking at PAWA point of view, yes, we have technical, but we need people in Africa to contribute to come up with a very good solution on which a few engineers at PAWA, they can solve this problem. And to be fair, we got a very, very good results through that competition. We got a very amazing solution. People compete like everywhere in Africa, different solution. They come up with very optimal solution. Our idea is to come up with a very small model which can learn locally, and the point of locally can learn on phone and can have very good accuracy, right? And this as a testimony, we got invitation from Tanzania Broadcasting Channel to go and present this solution. So this is because everyone need a real-time transcription solution in Swahili, right? So
Yeah.
we host in Zindi, and the winners got a money as well, right? And for the company point of view, we got a solution, and the solution was public, so anyone can replicate the solution. We release the data. Thanks again, Zindi team. We curate those data. I remember the Zindi team. We were like, no, remove this metric, put this metric. So thanks again. We got a lot of experience. Before we were competitors, now we are hosting, and we were so proud from PAWA point of view. Like, yeah, this is achievement, and yes. So
Yeah,
the
amazing.
solution is to build a transcription whereby people speak in Swahili and whatever type of Swahili. And our data set were valid from the law, healthcare, uh, YouTube, and everywhere. And that was really benchmark. It's not like academic benchmark where they focus on specific devices, but this was a lot of different data set where it reflected a real problem, a real use case in Africa. So thanks again. So
Yeah.
that is a
No,
nutshell about the
we
competition.
loved it. We loved it. I think you touched on something that's important also is also, I mean, a big component of this was it being able to run on a mobile device, right? So it's not just accuracy, but it's also the efficiency of these models. So I'm curious now that you've been in the market for a little bit with PAWA and you're maybe working with different customers in different sectors. What are the use cases that you're most excited about that you see the most demand for Swahili language models?
Uh, I have experience in Tanzania. So, as I said earlier, Tanzania we speak Swahili in every part of the application of the business process in Tanzania. And from power point of view, we have seen a lot of use case whereby we need a little AI to solve the African problems. One of them is from edtech, right? Fintech, right? And from agriculture. And I can say agriculture is the most of them because we still have high number of literate people, whereby even chatting is still problematic. So someone building application whereby they can speak and then the model speak them back, that will be a huge advantage, right? But still, AI has still has a limitation, always a problem, right? Because assume if you do deploy this application to schools and children they just used to cheat, instead of learning, they used to cheat. So we need to see how we can balance this innovation. Yes, we wanted innovation. We last year we released our edtech application, which is called Tutor AI, and and we come to realize we need a lot of research to make it production, because if students use it, they don't help them. They don't use to help them. They just make them more dumb,
Yeah.
right? So we were
Yeah.
afraid of to make it again public. So we now do a lot of research to make, okay, how can we make it gamic, like to be as a game instead of so the game student will get with it and will learn on it instead of just asking what the capital of Rome and then or Italy and then say Rome and then they just put Rome and teacher will say, okay, this student is very genius, instead of trying to understand what the um the motive, why is teacher asking me what the Rome, right? So we need this kind of research. So
Right.
we can have a lot of application for now, but I'm also skeptical about deploying, like every time you come up with a solution or idea, you deploy and everyone will clap for you. This sometimes is dangerous. But for power point of view, we are saving fintech industry, agriculture, most of our customers from agriculture sectors, because we support voice and images and text as well. And we have a client from edtech whereby we support them. One of the clients called Infotaruma. But as I said earlier, we need to be very cautious about application in terms of edtech. Uh, um, I'm not comfortable and proud saying most of the time application in edtech, but because we need more and more research on it.
Yeah. So Michael, there's a lot of things happening right now. It's really an exciting space to be in. There's been a lot of investments from, everyone from Google and the launch of the Wahal data set to, you had mentioned our friends at Lalapa and Masakane. There's so many initiatives. What gaps, as people are looking to make more investments and support this sector of African AI, African AI, what are the gaps that you still feel need to be filled?
Yeah, so the biggest gap is very basic but very important. First of all, is data. Like we can invest billions, but if we don't solve the fundamental problem, we don't solve anything, right? And another thing, I've seen a lot of disintegrated effort, like one at a time power. We were trying to approach different prayers in African prayers to see how we can join our effort to solve African problem. But each one have self ambitions or goals, and eventually we might solve separately. Kind of, we're trying to compete each other, but we don't solve anything. So I think um, first is data, and data we need joint effort. I don't understand, for example, Kikuyu, right? So, but if there's a organization in Kenya which deal with language model and speak Kikuyu, we can also support them. For example, we can give them tool whereby we can use to annotate data from our side, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, we have GPU which we own it, and we are happy, more than happy, to support this in any initiatives. I like initiative like GSMA, whereby they call for African prayers and try to see how we can solve our African problem, right? So the second is a compute, right? As any startups, it's very difficult to access this compute. Like how much you can pay to do research in order to come up with a good solution like Google. You can beat Google, but you can solve real African problem. And so compute is still a problem, and most of the people or organization fail, especially startup, because they think, okay, we need a computer to solve this problem. And for Africa, we have lacking evaluation tools. Like we don't have a very, very good, serious African benchmark to solve this African benchmark. Everyone can submit their papers or contribution, but if we don't evaluate our models, right, no matter how much you can say, okay, I release this, but what actually matter is how this related to solve the real problem, right? So we need this evaluation tool to be there, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of African startups produce kind of the claim like they develop this, but are this thing real production? Because one thing we learn from PAWA is releasing the model is one thing, but to make production, yeah, is hell of another thing, right? So we need to try to see how realistic it is, right? And I'm not saying like I'm advising Google or something like that, but they have to see where to put the investment, because sometimes it's good to give a seed startup, but sometimes doesn't help the progress, because also some players you need to consider as well. Uh, yeah, a lot of startups can claim they produce this, but a lot of models are not production, to be honest. Even these open models from big tech, still they're not being production in Africa. You need a lot of tweaking, you need a lot of knowledge, you need a lot of application. So we need like a effort not only to support maybe generation of data, because now we are looking like data generators, like, but in reality, our problem might not only be data, might be even a compute, right? Can they support it? Right? Those are things which we need to sit. They need to sit down and see where to support. Okay, they can support that as well as they can support startup in the states. They can support. Yes, we need every part of the player. For example, we certify our PAWA. We don't have problem with data, so we don't much concentrate with that. We need to scale up, right? The product to scale up to solve every African problem as much as possible. Those are more important. So we need a production. Uh, so if sources are to be used very well, I think we need a share data. I like Masakane, the way they're doing to release datas. But we don't have Masakane for compute. That's very unfortunately. I know now I'm in GSM. Zindi also tried to produce this benchmark for African language, which is very
Yeah.
good thing as well. Yeah. So joint effort, yes, we can solve African problem, but individual efforts, I don't think we as PAWA, we don't plow ourselves like we are doing this. We need every player to be there, and we don't consider any other player. We're doing the same thing as us as a competitors. Not now, and not now, but maybe it's better, but not for now. We need joint effort. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Exactly. There's still a lot of problems and a lot of, I guess, gaps that exist along the entire, I guess, production value chain.
Yes.
So we need everyone working.
We
Um,
need everyone working and
yeah.
not treating these African researchers. just for show of showcase. You know, we need to
Right.
come up with something which is workable. I need something which don't say, okay, I'm working, then I use ChatGPT image and then I put there and say this is our product. We need something which is working product. That will be
Mhm.
good story for everyone.
Yes, yes, exactly. Um, so I have one last question because of course we have thousands of young people who are on Zindi and just starting out their career, starting out their education journey. Um, and I mean, you've had this incredible journey yourself. What advice do you have to young people today in Africa who are coming up? And even especially considering the ways that AI itself might be disrupting the market. What advice do you have if you were talking to your 20-year-old self?
Yeah. Yeah. So for young peoples, I've very basic advice to them. They shouldn't chase the tools, right? They should not chase the tools, right? They should build a capabilities, right? They should learn from basics. They should learn mathematics instead of just going and doing. I mean, nowadays with cloud code, for example, you can code anything, but I really know what is the fundamental, what is going on underneath, right? So they should start try to learn the basics of mathematics, programming, excuse me, uh, they should creating some data intuition like why do I need this data? Why do I need this data? Because those are very basic and very important things they should know. And yeah, I mean they
Yeah,
shouldn't as they should also as well learn this tool. Right? I'm not saying they should learn at all tools, but they should first learn the fundamentals, right? They should learn
yeah,
the foundation of every of these things, and later learn programming. And I would recommend most of them to learn Python. But whenever you are learning Python, try to be as much as good in linear algebra, probabilistic models, understand probabilities, just normal basic statistic. Because from there, once you have the basics and you come to the platform like Zindi, you saw a complicated task in competition. Yeah, I mean, regardless of the first submission, sometimes Zindi produce startup code. You can follow startup code and you understand, okay, what this were trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, why they use this approach, why they're not using this approach. By then, yes, you can be very good. You can be very good. And actually, we need some young kids who are very good than us, even than like this is how any generation want the next generation to be better than them, right? So I'm encouraging them to use it to not chase a tool, but to build a foundation whereby they can do anything, and actually they can do anything,
yeah.
provided they want it.
It's amazing you say that, Michael, because I've heard it from others as well, and it's actually it's an interesting and counterintuitive in some ways, conclusion of what's happening, how AI is maybe affecting the market, that the fundamentals actually become quite important. Michael, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thank you for all the insights. I love talking to you. Yeah, and keep up the great work at PAWA.
Thank you, Salim. And from Power, on behalf of Power, we say thank you again, Zindi and everyone on the space.